Welcome to the Lava Fantasy Football League. This is the Week 2 recap. I'm going to try something a little bit different this week. I spent a lot of time trying to make last week's episode. Spliced in a lot of clips. It was a lot of effort, but it was too much work. So I'm going to just do something quick. Today's drink though, this is a ginger tonic. It's not such a pretty looking drink, yeah. There's no alcohol in here. It's just ginger syrup and tonic water and some lemon. It's super tasty. Wow, that's good. We had our circuit assembly this weekend, so I didn't really get to watch too much football. And I'm kind of bummed anyways. Lions lost in really brutal fashion, so not really in the mood for talking football. So what we'll do this week is we'll react quickly to everybody's scores and maybe just take a look at some of the players who's leading the league. You're going to see there's a lot of people who are either whatever they did last week, totally different this week. And then there are some who, like, you were surprised by what they did last week in week 1. And you're kind of skeptical. Are they going to be the same? You know, are they going to be just as good as they were last week? Or are they going to be, like, really bad? Some of them just kept it up in week 2. But anyways, let's just get into the scores. We'll look at Mia Milo versus James Swag Team first. This was not a close one. James beat Mia Milo by just about 30 points. If you look down the scores on Mia Milo's side, he benched Arish last week and started Jared Goff this week. Switched it up and then also got the less points again this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a decent game, 102 receiving yards, 6 receptions, and a lost fumble. He went over the century mark, decent game. Calvin Ridley, here's one who kind of came down. I feel like they all happened to my team. Jahmyr Gibbs, 39 receiving yards, pretty decent. 7 receptions, 17 rushing yards. Okay score, but we need more from him. Breece Hall, another big come down guy, only 1.3. He really voiced his displeasure too. Sam Laporta, reinforcing my conviction in him as a tight end, so at least I'm rewarded there. And George Pickens finally showed out tonight in Monday Night Football, 127 receiving yards with 1 long receiving touchdown, looking like what I thought he was, an elite receiver. The New York Jets D, really sad, and this is probably my biggest downfall, the Jets. So I went all in with the Aaron Rodgers hype, and I got burned by it with both Breece Hall and New York Jets. Maybe they can turn it around. We'll see. The problem is the quarterback. Yeah. Off the bench, nothing home to write about except Goff playing better. For James' team, Tonga Viola is another guy who came down big time. He only had 249 pass yards, 1 passing touchdowns, 21 completions. They still won, though. That's all they needed. Michael Thomas, 55 receiving yards for 7 receptions. It's pretty decent. Deebo Samuel, looking like a classic Deebo Samuel game. A lot of rushes, a lot of receptions. So Rashad White had 73 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown and 30 receiving yards. Big game from him. Kyle Pitts, again, suffers from just the no-pass offense in Atlanta. 15 receiving yards, 2 receptions. A.J. Brown, 29 receiving yards on 4 receptions. He was frustrated much of Thursday night. Had a touchdown called back, and it reflects in his score. This is the reason why James built such a big lead with Aubrey having 167 field goal yards, 4 field goals total. And off the bench, Herbert outplays Tonga Viola. So he has a really strong quarterback duo. The hardest choice that he'll have to make is choosing between those two. You got Cooper Kupp on IR, but there's something happening in the Rams territory that makes you kind of question, are we going to get the classic great Cooper Kupp, who was WR1 a couple of years ago? Next up, Eric versus Michael. Eric is he's getting ready to leave on vacation, but he gets to go and have a nice trip because he won for this week, knocking out Michael. Trevor Lawrence had 216 pass yards, 22 rushing yards, 22 completions. Didn't do as well. That's actually a pretty bad game. Didn't do as well as Dak Prescott, who had 255 pass yards and 2 passing touchdowns, 31 completions. The biggest notable is T. Higgins bounced back from 0 to hero. He has 2 receiving touchdowns, 89 receiving yards, 8 receptions. Big game from Derrick Henry. 80 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 25 rushing attempts. Najee looks sad. Njoku looks right around the middle of the pack for tight ends. Herbert had 35 rushing yards, 23 receiving yards, and 7 rushing attempts. Pretty decent, but the score is kind of low. Strong kicking game from Elliott from Philly, who made 4 extra points and a field goal. The Buffalo D, also decent, had 2 interceptions, kept the score low, keeping Vegas down to 10 points and 1 fumble recovery. Off the bench, Zay Flowers had a decent game, statistic-wise, but not huge fantasy-wise. But so he kind of, at least he sustained a nice floor level. He had 62 receiving yards, 4 receptions, 6 rushing yards. Dalton Kincaid had 43 receiving yards on 5 receptions. Terry McLaurin had a receiving touchdown, 54 receiving yards off 5 receptions. For Mike L, he also played the wrong quarterback. That seems to be a theme, at least for the first 2 games. Deshaun Watson only had 235 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 22 completions, compared to Daniel Jones, who had also a bounce-back game. 321 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. Justin Jefferson, another big and strong game. So he's been sustaining his excellence, worthy of his draft slot. 159 receiving yards, 11 receptions. He did fumble in the end zone, and that cost him dearly. That kind of changed the tone of the game. Philly kind of went up big. They came back, but it was just too little, too late. Devontae Adams had a strong game. 84 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown on 6 receptions. Ramondre Stevenson, another strong game. 1 rushing touchdown, 50 rushing yards, 15 rushing attempts. A.J. Dillon, not that great of a game. Dallas Goedert, right there, middle of the pack. I think 5 is the average for tight ends. Brandon Ayuk has had a return back down to earth game. He is questionable, so I don't know if he got hurt. Let me take a look. Left shoulder injury, so keep an eye on that. Nick Folk, decent kicking game, and then the Baltimore D was down. The biggest difference I think here was, the score is relatively close. If you started Daniel Jones, you're definitely winning this game. Tough one. Kyren Williams. Here's an interesting tidbit. Cam Akers in the doghouse again and getting ready to be shipped out. So it's a reality TV show with that guy. Kyren Williams is de facto number 1, so you might want to slot him up into your starting slot. He had a 1 rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and 52 rush yards. So big game from him. Oh, look at this. Hunter Henry. You picked up a really good tight end from last week, and he balled out again. So you played the wrong tight end as well. So a lot of mistakes for Mike, who left points on the bench. Cost him this game. It was his game to lose, and he lost it. One for Mahomes. Oh, big game from Darren. 133.22 to Brad, who, oh man, it's kind of looking like Groundhog Day for Brad. The thing is, what's the name? Russell Wilson was just bad last year. Burrow at least has an excuse of being injured. All right. For Darren, Pat Mahomes, 305 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 30 rush yards. Big game from him. Godwin, pretty average. Shaheed, a decent game, 63 receiving yards, 63 return yards. That's a lot. I guess the return yards you don't get a lot. It's 25 yards per point. 4 receptions. Christian McCaffrey, boom, big game. 116 rush yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 20 rushing attempts. Moss, another big game. 88 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 4 receptions. Freiermuth, way down. He had 1 catch for 2 receiving yards, but it didn't matter because he had another big 20-point game from Tyler Lockett, 2 receiving touchdowns, including the game winner. Broke my heart with 59 receiving yards and off of 8 receptions. Harrison Butker, kind of a low-key kicking game. Dallas D, strong again. 3 interceptions, Kept them under 13 points and 3 sacks. Off the bench, I mean, you played it fine. For Brad, again, like we said, it hurts. We're not sure how it's going to be with Burrow. He needs that ankle healed. Garrett Wilson, pretty strong game despite having a less than ideal quarterback. 83 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Jerry Jeudy, kind of slowly coming back. I mean, he was injured, so you're going to have to wait a little bit and be patient with him. 3 receptions for 25 receiving yards. Bijan, boom. So he's rewarding you early and often. So that target share that we had to monitor with Algier between him and Robinson, this looks like Robinson is going to take a hold of RB1. He had 124 rushing yards, 48 receiving yards off of 4 receptions. Jared Cook, another good game from a running back, 36 receiving yards on 4 catches and 123 rush yards. Mark Andrews is back, and he balls out like an elite tight end that he is. 1 receiving touchdown, 5 receiving yards and 5 receptions. Jamal Williams, way down there. And McPherson, another pretty pedestrian. Actually, not pedestrian. That's not a good kicking game. San Francisco D, right down there. Okay, on the bench, there's some points there on the bench. Jordan Addison, this rookie, is clamoring for starting, Brad, so you might want to consider him. The good news so far, he's still producing, even though Justin Jefferson is. Jordan Addison is just doing well. And then Collins, out of nowhere, 146 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. So that's a lot of points left on the board. I don't know if that's making you catch Darren, but there are some positives there. Right. Richie versus Jeremy. Richie had a bounce back game from Lamar Jackson, 237 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, strong game, 143 receiving yards on 11 receptions. Stephon Diggs, mid-game, 66 receiving yards, 7 receptions. Josh Kelly, bad game. Mixon, okay game. Hurst, bad game. Connor, good game. 106 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdowns, 23 rushing attempts. Younghoe Koo, big kicking game. Cleveland, low-key game. Brian Robinson would have helped you big time on your bench, 29.7 with 2 rushing touchdowns. Drake London had a big bounce back game, so at least he was started to be more involved in the receiving game. He is the receiving game. Montgomery, 67 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 16 rushing attempts, but he's hurt, might be out for a couple weeks. Gainwell's hurt, and DeAndre Swift 8 because of him. And that brings us to Jeremy, who has DeAndre Swift. I would have roasted Jeremy early and often because he left a lot of points on the bench, but it didn't matter because everyone else balled out too. Like, look at that. Swift, career game. 175 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. Kirk Cousins was the correct quarterback. 4 passing touchdowns on 364 passing yards. Gabe Davis, a big game, 92 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. But Josh Allen didn't have a bad game. He had a great game, actually. Tyreek Hill came back down to earth with 1 receiving touchdown on 5 receptions. DK Metcalf had a solid game, but he did get hurt. Mostert had a huge game, 121 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, so that's big time. And Keelan Allen, 2 receiving touchdowns, 23. I'm looking at the wrong line. On 111 receiving yards, and then a Washington D that's pretty average, so it didn't matter. Jeremy is 2-0, first place. Auto pick wins again. Brownsville Jets. Is this our highest score of the week? I think it is. So poor Gary. I guess it didn't matter. He may have not shown up at all because look at those scores from Mike. Jalen Hurts had a bounce back game, 2 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown. Devontae Smith, another big game, 131 receiving yards and a touchdown. Even DJ Moore kind of played much better, even though they're still kind of stinking up there with their quarterback. Saquon Barkley, another huge game, but it looks like he got hurt, huh? He had a couple touchdowns receiving and running. Injured his ankle in the waning minutes of their eventual win. Oof. So keep an eye. He has an ankle sprain. Gus Edwards, decent game from him. Picked him up after Dobbins got hurt, and he just plug it play. TJ Hawkinson, big time, huge games. Probably makes him like the top tight end now so far. 2 receiving touchdowns. And then everyone else is pretty average. And then for your bench, nothing much to mention on your bench. For Gary, Jordan Love had a decent game, but you started the wrong quarterback as well. Geno Smith had a better game and knocked out my Lions. Jalen Waddle also not that good. He's questionable. Is he hurt as well? He left Sunday night's game late after being hit in the head. Oh, concussion protocol. Tough one. Hopefully he's okay. And then bad scores throughout. I don't want to put you through it. I do have to mention, though, Gary, you did the other big one that you left points on the bench is Puka Nacua. 147 receiving yards, 4 rushing yards. So, is this Cooper Kupp 2.0? What is going to happen to Cooper Kupp when he comes back? I don't know. But that's the beauty of Matt Stafford. If he like you, you're going to be an elite receiver. Okay, let's go to the last one. Now we're just cranking through right now. Captain Morris. Tough loss to Aaron. He started Mac Jones. 231 passing yards. 1 touchdown. Jamar Chase. Oh, tough one. He's wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on who you ask, and he's just not playing like it. Again, that's a reflection of Burrow being hurt. You do have some positives with Kenneth Walker. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, so that was good. And Moody had a big kicking game, so you got the right kicker. He was drafted high, so he better put up points like that. But we won't run you through the ringer that much, Morgan. We can go to Aaron. He got Fields, who was outplayed by another Ohio State quarterback, C.J. Stroud. Another wrong quarterback played this week. Fields looks like he's regressing. It's kind of sad. Chris Olave, 86 receiving yards, 6 receptions, big time catch. Tony Pollard, a solid, decent game, 72 rushing yards, 37 receiving yards. And then your biggest game comes from Mike Evans, who had 171 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 6 receptions. He's a player. Pay the man. Give him his money. He's playing well. Maybe don't give him his money. Maybe that's why he's playing well. Anyways, that's the recap for the week. Let's look at league leaders. How about that? Quarterback. Kirk Cousin is the top quarterback, followed by Mahomes, Herbert. Russell Wilson is back up there, and he's on waivers. Tua comes back down. That's how good he was last week. Is most of his points was from last week. Mac Jones is up there. Wide receiver. Tyreek Hill still tops. Mike Evans is way up there. Justin Jefferson. The big surprise, Puka Nacua. Nico Collins, too, is kind of a surprise up here. And then Josh Reynolds. So if you're in need of a wide receiver, he's a possible one. He's been a reliable target. Plus, Amon-Ra has been hurt. And he's a good guy to use until, what's his name? Jameson Williams comes back. Let's get the running backs. McCaffrey, big time. The big surprise, Kyren Williams. Put him in your starting lineup. He's a RB1 now. Unless they make up again and Cam Akers comes back. Any other surprises? Robinson being high is kind of a surprise. Everyone else is not really. Tight end. My favorite thing to monitor. Because I'm just curious who's next man up. So like I said, Hawkinson is back up. Hunter Henry. Look at all those wasted points on Hunter Henry, who was on waivers last week and on somebody's bench this week. Then there's Evan Ingram, Darren Waller, Logan Thomas, and Sam Laporta. Ooh, Kylan Granson. That's interesting. Why is he here? Oh, okay. Better game today. Keep an eye on him. That's the first time I've heard of him. And then Mark Andrews is back. Mark Andrews is back. You know who else is back? Travis Kelce. There he is. Oh, he did pretty good. So, there you go. There's your top. Anyways, here's the thing. I think next week I'm gonna have another video, but we're gonna be, a couple of us are gonna be joining Eric on a vacation, so I do not know if I'm gonna be able to have videos like these. We'll try. If anything, maybe they'll be even briefer than this, but we will try to keep it going. Anyways, that's it. Bye.